So I'd like to begin by introducing the panel for you tonight. First of all, Labour Broadcasting spokesperson Claire Curran, whose bill, of course, has brought all this to the public attention. Claire, would you like to come up, please? Thank you. And the Greens Broadcasting spokesperson, Julie Ann Genter. New Zealand First MP and former North Shore Mayor, Andrew Williams. A specialist in this whole area of media and politics, Dr. Joe Atkinson from the University of Auckland. You'll see that there is an empty chair. And the reason there is an empty chair is that there are no government speakers on the platform tonight. So before we come to our speakers, I'd like to ask Miles Thomas of Save TVNZ7, who's organised this meeting, to explain just why there are no government speakers here tonight.
Hi there. Yes, tonight I'm Craig Foss. We invited Craig Foss, obviously, but he couldn't make it because he was busy, as was Nikki Kay, the local MP, and also several other National Party MPs from around Auckland who couldn't make it, unfortunately. We then asked for a position statement, if you will, from Craig Foss, and that wasn't forthcoming either, unfortunately. But I have got some a letter that I was sent some time ago in response to, and it's the standard email response to all our emails to Craig Foss to keep TVNZ7 going. And I'll read that out, and it will help us to understand the policy that they have taken. The government values public broadcasting, and that commitment is evident in the funding we make available. The government spent over $220 million last year to support all forms of public broadcasting, with $84 million of contestable funding for television programs through New Zealand On Air. As you were advised by Minister Coleman, this government is focused on supporting broadcasting content for mainstream audiences through New Zealand On Air, instead of directly funding individual broadcasters. Public service broadcasting has an important role to play in New Zealand media, but it has to adapt to radical changes in broadcasting technology. In the digital era, there are a variety of changing platforms to air public service broadcasting. The government's $1.6 billion investment in ultra-fast broadband will make sure all New Zealanders can access new technologies. TVNZ7 was set up with time-limited funding in 2006 as part of the lead-up to the switchover from analogue to digital television. There was never any commitment that government funding would continue beyond the contracted period. The funding expires this year, and TVNZ has decided that the channel will cease to broadcast past June. It is possible some of the programs currently screening on TVNZ7 will continue to get New Zealand On Air funding and be screened on other channels. So that's what we're up against. Thank you.
Now I'd like to ask each of the speakers here tonight to give us roughly a 5-minute outline of their positions with regard to TVNZ and public television in general. And it's appropriate that I should start with Claire Curran.
Well, hello everyone. It's great to have such a good turnout here tonight. And I'd like to first of all acknowledge my Labour colleague Jacinda Ardern, who's standing down the back there. And also my former Labour colleague in Parliament, Carol Beaumont, who's sitting right there. Put your hand up. So there's a few of us from Labour here tonight. Hands up, those of you who watched Backbenchers in the last couple of weeks. Oh, good, very good, very good. Well, I'm sorry today that I didn't bring the Goodnight Kiwi with me. I hope that you saw the Goodnight Kiwi on Backbenchers over the last couple of weeks, and I actually don't think he'll quite fit in that coffin. But he is an important symbol and motif, I suppose, for this campaign, which is that it's about all of us and it's about what it means to be a Kiwi. 4.5 years ago, a Labour government invested $79 million in TVNZ6 and TVNZ7. And they were important little channels that were new and that were taking us into the digital environment. And there was a lot of hope invested in those channels. And on the 30th of June, TVNZ will be switched off by a national government and replaced with reruns of TVNZ. And that's why we're all here tonight. What the government says is that it can't afford it, we don't need it, that no one watches it, that those who do are part of an elite, and that public broadcasting can be delivered anyway, and is being delivered anyway by New Zealand On Air. Now, all of those arguments are rubbish, absolute rubbish. And I know that other speakers will talk about the value of public broadcasting to our nation, the absolute importance of it, and the fact that there is 1.4 million people, New Zealanders, who actually are watching TVNZ every month, TVNZ7 every month. Now that's more than watching a number of channels on Sky, around about the same or perhaps more than watching Māori TV. It is performing a very important place. It plays a very important part in our media environment, and it's only been around for 4.5 years and it's growing in importance. Overseas, the BBC, which is hardly comparable to TVNZ7, but the UK government invests $4.6 billion every year in the BBC. In Australia, $912 million a year into the ABC, $16 million a year for TVNZ7. It's not much. Last week, the Australian government announced in their budget that they were going to invest a further $200 million plus in both SBS, the ethnic channel, and the ABC. They put a value on public broadcasting. This government doesn't. So I introduced a private members bill last week, and it is essentially, if it gets drawn from the ballot, it will save TVNZ7 by providing funding direct to be paid by TVNZ, but ensuring its independence from TVNZ. So I guess we have to ask ourselves, I mean, that is an interim measure, and I hope there will be some discussion around that, because we need sustainable funding for public broadcasting in this country, and Labour is committed to that. There is a real debate to be had about how that sustainable funding should occur. But I think if we ask ourselves, do we put a value on public broadcasting, and how much would we pay, how much should we pay, that's what the debate we should be having now, not whether or not we're going to switch it off on the 30th of June. So I ask you all tonight to support the Save TVNZ campaign, to tell the government what you think, to sign the petition, to attend these meetings around the country. This is the first of, I think, 7 or 8 meetings that are happening, and they seem to be growing every day. To write letters to your local newspapers, and possibly turn up, if you can, to Parliament on the 29th of June, which is the last sitting day before TVNZ7 gets cut off. I've always thought of New Zealand as being a plucky country. This government seems intent, by killing off public broadcasting, by turning us into drones. I think that we have to run a loud public debate around these issues if we want to keep something that is extremely valuable to us. Let's not have our kids growing up on American TV and speaking with American accents. Let's not fill our screens every night with reality shows based on formulas that have been developed overseas. Fine that we have them, but let's have choice of other things as well, particularly content that's developed by Kiwis and is about Kiwis, that's quirky, that's interesting, that's funny, challenging, intelligent, and thought-provoking. We need people, more people like Wallace Chapman, who runs backbenchers. We need to be nurturing that sort of talent in this country, and we're not. And killing off TVNZ7 is killing off that sort of talent. So let's decide that public television is important to our nation, to our identity, and let's keep TVNZ7, let's fund it properly, and let's be proud of who we are. Thanks.
So I'll ask Julianne Genter from the Green Party to address you now.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. It's so amazing to be here tonight, to see this great turnout at the first public meeting. And it is slightly ironic that the positioning statement delivered by the Green Party tonight will be with an American accent. I apologize. I apologize for the poor quality of the television programming that comes from the country that I also come from. But in the United States, they also do have public broadcasting. And in fact, in every OECD country, except Mexico, New Zealand will be, with the closure of TV7, one of the only countries in the OECD that doesn't have publicly funded broadcasting. And it is so, so important. And the Green Party have long been champions of public broadcasting because we know that it serves such an important role. Now, firstly, there's this important cultural, social role, which is that entertainment is something that is core to human culture. And it's how we share our values, we share the laughter and the tears. And that may all sound very touchy-feely, but it's in the Green Party policy. It's important. It's important. When we look back at history, the greatest art was not that we treasure today, the greatest art, the greatest architecture, the greatest plays, were not delivered based on narrow commercial interests. So in the future, it would be absolutely tragic if we lost that. But secondly, it serves an incredibly important and essential political role, and that is that to have a healthy, functioning democracy, we need informed, robust, independent media, and that has to be available. And what we're seeing more and more worldwide is that there's an absolute consolidation of media control. And now it's just a few big corporations that are controlling most of the media content that's available. And that's dangerous. And that's particularly dangerous when we're facing a number of challenges. And it is the vested interests who've benefited from the status quo who are going to end up looking to protect their interests by determining what sort of information is available for people to access. And a vigorous public broadcasting service provides both of those things. It provides entertainment, it provides enlightening programming, and it stimulates participation in democracy. And it's been really amazing to see in the short amount of time that TV7 has been on the air, how it has developed an audience, it has developed this fantastic show, which is one of my absolute favorites, which is Backbenchers. And it's gotten up to 1.4 million viewers a month, which you heard from Claire. And the Green Party absolutely welcomes Claire's members' bill, and we would support it 100% if it's pulled from the ballot. So as TV1 and TV2 are becoming increasingly commercialized, what we're finding is that there's less local content, there's less programming, and we're going to lose the opportunity, another economic opportunity, to support high-value, low-volume product, which is television programming. And that's something that we can nurture all of the incredible creative talent that exists here in New Zealand. We can be proud of it, and we can support it, because every successful industry that is an export industry in New Zealand has government support. So we have basically a win-win-win. We have a cultural win, we have a win for democracy, and we have an opportunity, an economic opportunity that we could absolutely nurture. So what I hope is that even though tonight we may be looking at the death, we're preparing to mourn for the death of TV7. What the Green Party would like to see out of this is hopefully an opportunity through these public meetings, through the participation, for the birth of something even better. If we can't save TV7, perhaps in the next, we can get a change of government, and then we can have something even better, which is, as Claire said, a sustainably funded, real, true public broadcaster like they have in Australia, like they have in the UK, and that is going to be extremely important going forward. And one final point, which is slightly off topic, I thought I should share with you that I did bring some petitions here tonight, which are at the back table, so I'm sure you've all signed the petition to save TV7. But if you'd also like to sign a petition to have a citizens-initiated referendum on asset sales, that's also back there if you're a registered voter and you'd like to see a referendum. What I think is fantastic about some of the incredibly poor policies we're seeing coming out of the current government is a real desire to participate. So it's the real invigoration of civic participation, and hopefully we can see something much better come for that from our participation. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and thanks for inviting me.
So New Zealand First MP, Andrew Williams, will come and talk to you now.
Well, thank you, Brian, and good evening, everybody. Kia ora. And it's wonderful to be here with such a huge turnout of people to support TVNZ7. I grew up in Central Hawke's Bay, and back in the early 1960s, I can recall our Autocrat TV on 4 legs sitting in the lounge, and we were one of only 2 or 3 families in Waipakarau to have a television. And I can remember in those early days, even then, looking back on and recalling as a young person some of the wonderful programs that were coming out in those days out of TVNZ, and as it was the NZBC, and remembering the quality of program that we had in those days. And then, of course, we moved on into colour television with the Commonwealth Games in 1974, and suddenly we had colour television in our lounges. And again, all through that era, we had so much good New Zealand programming and so many interesting programs. And tonight we have the likes of David Beatson here tonight. We have Brian Edwards, of course. We've got Judy Callingham. We've got Miles Thomas, and we've probably got many other media people here today who, over the last 3 or 4 decades, have played such a huge role in New Zealand television. And these people are here tonight to attest to the fact that we have had in the past very, very good television. And you can remember programs like Gallery and many of those other wonderful programs which really did get political debate going in this country, get proper questioning, get proper analysis of issues, and have proper investigative journalism on our screens. What we're seeing now is a dumbing down of television. There's you just cannot deny it. We are seeing it dumbing down. Who in this room wants to see another cooking program? Who in this room wants to see another border patrol program? Who in this room wants to see another police chase program? This is what we're getting time and time again. And honestly, the politicians in power simply want to see the nation dumbed down. They do not want to see thinking New Zealand think. And when you look at TVNZ7 and you look at the wonderful programs like the Court Report and you look at Backbenchers, the many other documentaries, it gets New Zealanders thinking. People think. And I've watched some wonderful documentaries on TVNZ7 on issues that you would never ever see on mainstream television in this country. And my daughter, who's 23, does likewise. My younger daughter, who is 19, does likewise. And my son, who's 26, does likewise. And they enjoy it. And they themselves said, wonderful, Dad, that you're going tonight to support TVNZ7, because they themselves, as young people, also say it's a crying shame that it's being done away with. 2 weeks ago, Jane and I, my wife, we were over in Australia, and we drove the Great Ocean Road, and we ended up in Adelaide from Melbourne, and then we took a trip on the Murray River. And we were fortunate in the different places to be staying, to be turning on the television. And I just couldn't believe the quality of the SBS over there and ABC and the other programming in Australia. And it was a joy to watch. And my wife is one of the first ones to say, don't turn the television on. But when there were good things to watch on SBS in Australia and when there were good things to watch on ABC, we watched it. Because it was almost like we'd come from this wilderness, the Sahara Desert, and we were seeing some very good quality programming in Australia, which we can only really in this country see in a very limited manner on the likes of TVNZ7 and very, very occasionally on the mainstream channels. Interesting today, I saw a letter in the Herald that actually somebody wrote in saying no wonder so many New Zealanders are heading off to Australia 1,000 a week. And perhaps the gentleman's here today, whoever wrote the letter, but they said one of the reasons probably is because there's better programming in Australia and they're doing away with TVNZ7 here. So whoever wrote that, good on them. But the fact is we are seeing this dumbing down. And what is disturbing, and Miles sent me some information, is the fact that TVNZ itself is not releasing the information for us to analyse. And apparently, even though we've heard there's 1.4 million viewers and all this sort of thing, the likes of Jonathan Coleman, when he was the Minister of Broadcasting, used a January figure to substantiate his reason for closing down TVNZ7. Now, of course, everyone's at the beach. They've gone off to their batches. They've gone to visit family in the South Island. They've gone wherever. And if you use a January figure to substantiate your reason for closing a channel, that's pretty manipulative and it's pretty underhand. And quite frankly, I think out of all this, and certainly New Zealand First as a party, we will continue to be pushing this. We want the facts of this. And if there are 1.4 million viewers, and if it is only $16.5 million to keep the channel going, and if the minister has manipulated figures to his own convenience to try and close it down, we want to get to the bottom of it. So quite frankly, we're standing fully in support of it. The Labour New Zealand First government brought TVNZ into being when the Right Honourable Winston Peters was with Helen Clark in government. Winston sends his best regards to many of you today, particularly those that are still alive that didn't die during the election, and he's very pleased that you didn't, and that you were able to see the teapot tapes on TVNZ7. But quite frankly, we certainly do, as a party, New Zealand First, think that if you're going to get genuine debate in this country, if you're going to get genuine inquiry, if you're going to get genuine coverage, you have to have public broadcasting, you have to have good quality broadcasting, and really it is a small cost in the bigger picture to ensure that we are an intelligent, good thinking population. Thank you.
And finally, Joe Atkinson from the University of Auckland, an old friend of mine and an absolute authority on the whole area of politics and media. Joe.
Thank you. Claire pinched my introduction. I think almost everything the government has said about TVNZ is wrong. And particularly they say we can't afford it and nobody watches it. They go on to say that digitalisation will supply more new stuff than anybody can possibly need, and that free market competition will raise the quality and lower the cost of programming. That's all complete bollocks. We're told we can't afford public service television, but as a proportion of GDP, the cost of public broadcasting is a tiny fraction of 1%, and the cost of TVNZ7 is but a small fraction of that. Indeed, even the $16 million that TVNZ says it spends on Channel 7 is probably inflated to cross-subsidise the fixed costs associated with commercial television. Is that why they're not releasing any information about what's going on inside that company? And just remember that those fixed costs are things like exorbitant executive salaries, presenter salaries, lavish marketing, expensive live-eye trucks and so on. You don't need any of that stuff to produce good public service television. It wouldn't surprise me if TVNZ had rorted the public purse in this way, given the way it's been rorted itself by successive governments in the one hand gives, the other one takes away behaviour with dividends and so on. So we can easily afford it. I'd be amazed if the real cost of keeping it were as much as $10 million. And we can easily find ways of paying for much more than TVNZ7 without troubling the Consolidated Fund. Peter Thompson reckons we could not only fund a PSB TV channel like TVNZ7, but also support our ailing regional and community broadcasters, double the Platinum Fund, and increase the funding of both Maori Television and Radio New Zealand by 30 to 40%, with a mere 1% levy on the telecommunications and paid TV providers. The $60 million thus raised would cost the levied companies virtually nothing because they'd pass it immediately on to their customers, half of whom already pay many, many, many times over as Sky Television subscribers for programs they watch less often than the free-to-air ones that are available to them free. So we can easily afford it. Forget about nobody watches it. We watch it, and a lot of other people do too. The claim that Channel 7 is for pointy heads is just silly. There's nothing on New Zealand free-to-air television that's for pointy heads. Actually, the opposite is true. Public service broadcasting is generally more accessible to ordinary people than commercial television. Commercial broadcasters pay lip service to popular tastes, but in practice they're ruthless exploiters of audiences on behalf of advertisers who don't give a damn about the poor, the elderly, other minorities, and so on. How gobsmackingly cynical can you be to introduce TVNZ7 to tease people onto the digital platform and then replace it with TV+1 when they've obeyed the call, which is replacing it with nothing? In recent overseas research, public service media systems have been found to attract larger audiences, devote more attention to public and international affairs, to foster greater public knowledge, particularly among the otherwise disadvantaged, in comparison with their more commercial counterparts. And that's a comparative research which looks at media systems across different kinds of broadcasting structure. Mixed systems like the BBC and the British system, purely public service systems like Finland and Denmark, and wholly commercial systems like the United States. So there's respectable empirical research about the superiority of a public service television in terms of communicating with ordinary people. Knowing how to make money out of broadcasting is not the same thing as being able to understand the economics of broadcasting. Demographic forces and business considerations shape the commercial media much more than broad audience demands, let alone individual audience demands. We're also often assured that digitalisation will somehow repair the market failures. But digital convergence actually makes things much worse by multiplying media channels, fragmenting audiences, spawning a flight to entertainment, and intensifying competition for public attention, which in turn increases oligopoly pressures and so on, monopoly pressures and so on. The real competition in these kinds of markets is not between program makers, but between program distributors who own the libraries to entertainment products that they endlessly recycle for a profit. In the end, it's the socio-political costs of not having public service broadcast television that make the case for keeping TVNZ7 absolutely compelling. It is those negative externalities that make it entirely legitimate to ask commercial corporations to shoulder the tiny proportion of the costs they impose on citizens in return for the privilege of profiting from that market. Communication products are distinctively public goods, not just in the economic sense of not being destroyed in use and therefore not being naturally scarce, hence the need for set-top boxes, manipulative program bundling, copyright laws and other means of commercial enclosure, but also in the political sense of being central to the provision of common resources for citizenship. Left to their own devices, commercial systems favour consumers over citizens and economic voices over political ones. That's why the commercial classes oppose all other rights. They think oppose public broadcasting, that is to say, because they think their God-given right to make a profit trumps everything else. But it doesn't, or it shouldn't, which is why we need TVNZ7. We need much more than that, of course, and I would prioritise other things. For instance, I would prioritise a rewriting of the brief of New Zealand On Air to insulate its funding more effectively from commercial pressures. I hope that later we will be able to have a discussion about other measures we might take to improve the black hole that is now New Zealand television. Thank you.
What are the chances of your private member's bill coming up? And if it did come up, what are the chances of it succeeding?
Well, the first answer is I don't know, because it goes into a ballot and it has to get drawn from the ballot, and the chances of that happening are around 1 in 56. So, but, you know, so who knows? But if it did get drawn, it's my view that there would be strong support across the opposition parties. I think you've heard tonight that there is support. The person who needs to be asked and put on the spot about this is Peter Dunn, because Peter Dunn has built his career on the back of his support for public broadcasting. He has been an avid, outspoken proponent for it for a long time, and during his most recent deal with the national government, he made statements about trying to save TVNZ7, but then basically admitted that he couldn't do the deal. So here's an opportunity for him to get involved and actually put his money where his mouth is, basically, and show he supports it. And so that's an important question. But the likelihood of it coming up is well, it's who knows. But as for the National Party support, I think that's an interesting point, because I believe that there are a number of National Party MPs who do support TVNZ7 and who do support public broadcasting, and I think, as you're going to see over the coming weeks, that there is a key person in the national government, and it's not key, there is a key person who has blocked TVNZ7's future, and he is extraordinarily powerful, and TVNZ did put up proposals to save TVNZ7, but it was blocked, and hopefully that will come out in the coming weeks.
Well, I'm sorry, I have to ask you who the key person is.
Mr. Media Works. Mr. Joyce.
Mr. Joyce, okay, thank you.
In January last year, around about 870, I believe, thousand people watched TVNZ7. As Mr. Williams pointed out, that was a much lower number than what actually would normally watch on an average day throughout the year. It grew over 70% to, as we know, 1.47 million at the end of last year. But Mr. Coleman then took the 860 or so thousand people, divided it by 4 to come up with the 207 or something as a weekly cumulative figure, which is not a statistically correct way to calculate the number of people who watch television, because many people would watch, for example, 4 episodes of Backbenchers per month, but that only counts them once. So many more people did watch that, but as the numbers weren't given out by TVNZ on a regular basis or in any sort of basis, there was no other, or that I know of, other figures which were put out there. And even if you read the editorial in the press, that number was still spouted within the last fortnight. And it was from January last year, and it was erroneous anyway. How has this been allowed to happen? And how have these numbers not been properly put down as incorrect? And how is it that people continue to read them and are misinformed on the realities of TVNZ7?
Did you write to the press?
I did. And I continue to comment, but I mean...
Do your comments get published?
They have done, yes, but there's, you know, hundreds of comments.
All right.
Reopening TVNZ7 if you're a part of a governing bloc in future. I really, really hope so. If you do, is there a way that you can do it so that a subsequent national government doesn't close it down again and we have to come to another bloody meeting?
Yes. Well, one of the points of the members' bill that I'm putting up, and as I said before, it is an interim measure because we do have to address this issue properly. But one of the key parts of the private members' bill is to create an independent foundation called the Public Media Foundation, which will remove the control of a public broadcaster from TVNZ, and it would enshrine it in legislation as independent from any government, and would make it much harder then to disband.
I dialed up my neighbour and challenged him about it. His name was Jonathan Coleman. And he said, well, actually, he was fully supportive of public service television, but he was voted down by the Cabinet. And then he mumbled something about Chatham House rules, which I didn't quite understand. So, or maybe I shouldn't have passed that on. Anyway, I'd like to ask the panel to consider a role that TVNZ7 seems to have evolved, probably unintentionally, and which is not the normal role of a public service, a classic public service channel. That is the role of incubator.
One of the categories of public service broadcasting that the Peacock Committee in Britain, on which our badly flawed system was based, and a committee which was filled with commercial television enthusiasts, decided that the commercial market would not supply. The whole point is that if you're going to make money out of broadcasting, and here I think you need to understand something about the nature of economic public goods. If you're going to make money out of broadcasting, the problem with public goods like communication products is that they're not easy to price. If you charge, the thing about television is that it wants to be free in the sense that if you produce a program, you can distribute among thousands and millions of people at almost no greater price than the original cost of the program. So the fixed costs of making television are the fixed costs of making television, but the marginal costs of sharing it with other people are almost nothing. Okay, and so in order to make money out of television, you've got to artificially create scarcity in those products, and in creating scarcity with set-top boxes and with various forms of commercial enclosure and so on, you are obliged to make programs for the audiences you want, who will pay for it, or the advertisers who will pay for it. And that means a great narrowing of the kind of programming that's made. It's lowest common denominator stuff. So it's that innovative programming, which is precisely what a core job for public service broadcasting.
Okay, did you want to comment on it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in recent years, I was also very, very impressed with Triangle Television and David Beetson here. And I can recall being on a number of interviews with David, and honestly, through much of the local body elections and all sorts of other things, Triangle was one of the few, again, that was doing something for properly getting the information out to the public. But I think there's potential with TVNZ7. When I look at what's happening in our tertiary education sector, in our secondary schools and throughout the education sector, if we could reinvent TVNZ to be also a provider throughout our education system during the day through the schools, providing much of the for people with second languages, as Triangle did with many of the other news programs for immigrant groups in our society. I think TVNZ7 has the opportunity to become a much broader specialist channel to provide an educational role as well. And I think if you bring in much of that educational funding as well, you even more justify having it, because it actually would then serve a purpose to help educate the population as well.
Thank you.
Brian, could I just comment quickly? Can I just thank the New Zealand First member for that comment, because I agree. I also just want to reinforce that regional television is really important in our country as well. It's sort of, it's struggling, and Triangle television is very important to Auckland. There are television stations throughout the country that have made a go of it on shoestring budgets and are providing a lot of added value to their regions. Radio New Zealand, as we know, plays an enormously important part as our radio broadcaster, state radio broadcaster across the country. But its ability to cover local news has been eroded and eroded and eroded. So the ability to have local programming in communities throughout New Zealand is really important. In Australia last week, part of that extra funding that went to the ABC was for regional coverage and to boost regional coverage. They get the importance of that, and they are moving into that digital environment through the internet, but they know how important it is to reflect the local communities in their broadcasting. We just, for some reason, don't seem to get that. Why is that?
Well, let me tell you something. I strongly support the idea of Channel 7. I strongly support that you have what I have in my other citizenships. I'm a citizen of Australia, citizen of the Republic of Ireland, and a citizen of the United Kingdom. I can watch the BBC, the ABC, and Radio Telefisheren. When I come to New Zealand, I feel I've gone to the Balkans. Let me tell you a sad fact of political life. There is no reason a National Party will support all you nice left-wing people for 15 million bucks. They can spend it on cancer victims and poor people, and, you know. The budget was written in February. There is no line item in the budget for this year for TV7. It will close on the 30th of June, because when you run out of money in the government, it's over. Can I put a proposition to you, to each of the members of the panel? Sir, the New Zealand government, for reasons completely unknown to me, owns 2 television channels which are utterly commercial. They have the longest commercials in the Western world. You can make 3 cups of tea during a New Zealand commercial break. For some reason, the Labor Party is wedded to having these commercial channels. I put a proposition to you. Why not sell TV2? Hands up who watches TV2 here. Go on, stick your hands up. I'm bloody surprised at you, but there you are. Sell it for 50 million bucks. The market's depressed, there's no money in advertising. Flick it off. Put it to my good friend Craig Frost. 20 million in next year's budget for TV7. 30 million in the minister's pocket, selling an asset. The National Party loves that. And you can fund a CBC, ABC, Telefisheren in this country, because you'd have, what, 40 million a year? Anyone doing the maths? Capital sale, 50 million. No more costs of the government running TV2. All the money can go into TV7. And then you spread it through the internet. But I want to know which of you up there would sell TV2 and how dear it is to your heart. I mean, these people love it. Put your hands up again.
It is. If you've got $50 million, you have to invest it to pay for the channel. Unless what you're doing is leasing it out to other commercial people, you're not going to get a constant stream. You want TVNZ7 to last for more than another year. If you keep it and use it to subsidise Television 7, then I think that you need to separate Television 7 completely from TVNZ7, because one of the problems is that TVNZ7 is not going to be particularly keen about marketing a public service broadcasting channel like TVNZ7, which is competing directly with its revenue generating channels. So you need some separation between TVNZ and TV7. And my view is that you're more likely to make more money out of TVNZ by keeping both of those channels and using their commercial revenue to subsidise TV7 than you are in selling either of them off.
I watch all kinds of things on television. I don't get to watch as much television as I used to. But, you know, the thing that I believe is that we should have more choice. And we should have the ability to watch whatever's on TV1, TV2, TV3 or TV7. And I think that that is the point. It's actually not, and I mean, I suppose with TV2, would it be saleable? Would anybody buy it? And so I get what you're saying, Mr. Citizen of 4 different countries, but I don't. I don't actually think that's the solution. I think if we're going to, let's make them pay a percentage on the advertising back. That wouldn't necessarily just be TV1 and TV2. It could be TV3, and also it could be a levy on the subscriptions of Sky. Let's have the discussion about that. Let's ask the people of New Zealand what they're willing, how important it is, and should we be willing to pay for it? And if so, what would be the best mix of doing that? But let's have that discussion instead of shutting it down and pretending that it's not an issue and we're all a bunch of elitists who don't really matter in the scheme of things. Let's actually have the discussion about how important this is, why other countries put a value on it and we don't seem to, and if we're going to put a value on it, how are we going to pay for it?
As they do in Australia with ABC radio and ABC television, having an NZBC again in New Zealand, so there is a public broadcaster that controls good radio and good public television as an entity, completely away from the commercial side, completely away from the politicians, and properly funded. And I think they've done it very well in Australia with the ABC, and we should have the NZBC again there. The only flaw in Mr McCaffrey's argument I see is that probably what would happen if we did try to sell off TV2 is that a certain Mr Stephen Joyce would go and loan another $43 million to Media Works to go and buy that as well.
It's not like TV7. But I'd like you to think of the words, who's read Brave New World? Aldous Huxley?
In the past.
Remember the masses were fed soma to keep them quiet and contented? That's what we're doing with the mass of the commercial television stations. But the other question I'd like to raise is, these figures are banded around who's watching. Nobody's asked me if I'm watching TV7, so who tells them? Okay? And how many more would be watching if the programmes were actually published in the paper?
And we have to get through to the New Zealanders. It's not about having choice in TV, it's about having a free and impartial TV channel that is free of political and commercial, that gives a voice to issues which we're about to lose. And we've been eroding our democratic rights for the commercial imperative for quite some time now.
You've got to go home, you've got to talk to the young ones, you've got to engage with the students, you've got to get them involved in a campaign that says you have your participation in democracy at stake when you see the kind of television that TVNZ7 presented, the kind of television that Stratos presented, tried to present and died to present, Triangle. We are at a pivotal point. We can continue to have totally commercial television. Totally commercial television does not offer you choice. It offers you more and more and more of the same. If you want to have choice, and I don't just mean choice of programs, but choices in your life, you've got to diversify the range of information, entertainment, and education that you get. And you've got to do it by having a variety of delivery mechanisms. And the one important gap in the mix in New Zealand is a public service broadcast channel. You've got to fight for it while it's here. I am really disturbed to see that coffin. It brassed me off when it came in the door. If it had been a prayer, I'd have been happier. And if we'd been celebrating the birth of something, I'd have been happier. I hope we're going to celebrate the birth of a campaign where you go home and you start getting on the phone to your local member. You start writing to the papers. You start bludgeoning the talkback people. You start telling everyone, this is damn important. It is about your choice, not just of programs. It's about your choices in life. That's my message. Thank you.
The purpose of the BBC was to inform, educate and entertain. And that's what we've lost, I think. just a very, very brief anecdote to draw the difference between attitudes at TVNZ and the ABC. I went off to Australia in '83, and with the admonition ringing in my ears that I'd find the ABC made the NZBC look like CBS. Well, actually, that was partly true. But I remember a few days after I started in the newsroom, and I was very much the little guy in the corner because Bob Hawke had just been elected, and they were very excited about that. But I said to the Chief of Staff one day, how does the 7 o'clock news rate compared to the commercials? He said, rate? We don't worry about ratings. It's not our business. I got back here 10 years later and heard TVNZ executives referring to programs as product. So doesn't that say it all? Anyway, here's the thing, just two little points I would like to make. We're talking about TVNZ7. It has bugged me for a long time that TVNZ7 was part of TVNZ. And one of the things that concerned me was that while they were running those hourly bulletins and the hour-long bulletin at 8 o'clock, that was very admirable. But unfortunately, they were using a product which was totally, or still are, totally commercially driven. And I think that's a point that we should bear in mind with this campaign, that any new public television entity should have absolutely nothing to do with TVNZ. Now that brings up the thorny question of how they're going to resource a proper news service, because TVNZ has, I can assure you, the most amazing resourcing for news. Despite all the cutbacks, they're still very fat in that newsroom up the hill. But that's the first point I make. So, yep, let's separate ourselves completely from TVNZ, from a commercial entity. Secondly, oh yes, the other thing I was going to say, and I think this is really important, and you don't hear it mentioned very often, the archive, which is in the care of TVNZ at this moment, if not owned by them, I know not. But I would suggest that the archive up until the SOE, until TVNZ became an SOE in the late 80s, when I don't think we have any commercial argument to hand over the archive after that. But all that archival footage before that date should be held on behalf of the people of New Zealand, maybe by the National Library or the, I don't know who. But anyway, that's just a thought we should bear in mind. Thank
you. Now, I just want to take a little break from your questions. We will come back to them because we have someone it's very good to have here tonight. Graham Merrick, who's sitting down at the front here, I think Joe Atkinson brought him along, is the visiting professor of sociology of culture at Loughborough University in England, and he's someone who has a great deal to say about public service television internationally. So would you like to come up and do that for us?
Well, the first and most important thing to say is that although my name is Murdoch, I have absolutely no blood relation to Rupert. My it is, but it's the last letter of my name is a K, not an H, which my side of the family take very seriously. First thing to say to you is you're not alone. Coffins like this are going to be carried into church halls and other gatherings all over Portugal very soon. The Portuguese government has decided to sell their public television service to try to help pay off the colossal deficit which they're now facing. And even the BBC, which has been justly celebrated, finds itself now battling for its life, battling for its soul. Had it not been for two journalists for the Murdoch organisation hacking into the cell phone of a dead teenager, Rupert Murdoch would have got total control of Sky Television, which he would have used relentlessly as a weapon to beat the BBC into the ground. The BBC still pays to have its channels on the Sky system. It should be the other way round. Murdoch should pay to carry them, but he doesn't. He's paid virtually no tax at all since he's been operating. What you're talking about is grand larceny. They're stealing your heritage and they're stealing your rights. You have a right to watch television without being bombarded with advertising. Very simple rights. Your children have a right to watch television that does not have advertising, that does not sell incessantly merchandise and products related to films, related to cartoons, or related to movies. Your rights as a citizen are what is at stake here. A number of people have made this point. You have a right to comprehensive information about what is going on in the world. You have a right to comprehensive analysis of why things are the way they are. You have a right to a diversity of argumentation about what we should do about situations. You have a right to see narrative stories, fantasies in all kinds of forms, not just soap operas, not just serials. And you have, this is very important, you have a right to participate. Nobody's mentioned this before. The future of public television will not simply be about what programs are made, although I'm as passionate as anyone in this room. I'm married to a filmmaker. But it's about a new kind of social contract between public television and its audiences. One of the wonderful things about the rise of the internet is that it allows people to participate. So if we're going to fight for public television, we need to fight for it in a more comprehensive way. One of the most interesting things the BBC is doing at the moment is asking people to record everyday conversations. And they're going to be deposited in collaboration with the British Library. They'll be deposited in the National Archive that will record the tone and the sound of life as it's lived at this moment in time. And this is a mass participation. It's what internet enthusiasts call crowdsourcing. It's an interactive situation. So the public television I would like to see is not just better programs, more diverse programs, but a more collective activity in which you and me, as members of the audience, have a chance to put something into a grand public resource. The other thing to say is that we must stop thinking about broadcasting as something that exists only by itself. You have museums, you have libraries, you have universities. We have a great resource of publicly funded institutions. One of the things that the new digital technologies allow us to do is to network those together so that when you go to the public television service, my vision would be that it not only gives you a point of entry into a wonderful range of programs, but it's an alternative to Google. It's your point of entry into this massive range of new resources which are coming online from all over the world, from libraries, from museums, from universities. My own university, for example, and universities around the world are now putting all of their research on the net for free. You don't know where it is, you don't know where to find it, but you could. We could create a public television service that was your point of entry into this great sea of public resources. You may very well lose the battle for Channel 7, but it should be the beginning of something better. It should be the beginning of a vision for a public resource that is open to everybody. And of course it should be funded. The thieves should pay back some of the money they've stolen. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And it's a peanuts for them. It's peanuts. But it would make all the difference. But not just to fund programs, but to fund a new kind of collective resource. You're right about the archive. It should be a public archive. But it should be accessible. All the museums should be accessible. All the galleries should be accessible. We have collectively a fantastic range of already material in the public domain. One of the great opportunities for public broadcasting is to be the gateway into that great domain. The place you would go to first to find out what If you wanted to find out about science, yes? You watch a science programme. Where else would you go to find out more? And the great thing that public television has is trust. People trust it. The thing that the BBC has, but none of the commercial television stations have, is that people trust it. They trust it to tell them the truth, they trust it not to con them, and they trust it not to do them down. That's a fantastic resource, and we can use that resource to open up a much wider range of opportunities for people. You're right, it's about choices, but it's not just about choices between programmes. It's about a whole range of material that's already available to you, but needs to be organised, it needs to be made accessible. So when we think about what we're going to do about public television, don't just think about it as television. Think about it as something bigger than that. Think about it as part of a much wider group of resources. We already own them. The question is, what are we going to do with them? And how are we going to make them accessible? You already own the museum. You already own the library. This is a fantastic moment in technological history. We could do it, and we should do it. And if we don't do it, then the world will belong to Murdoch and it will belong to Google. I don't want to live in that world, and I hope you don't.
And I think we will just embarrass the hell out of the government so much that at the end of the day, do they want to continue this fight for what is basically $10 million a year, or would they like it to go away? And I think there is an opportunity to do that. So just spread the word, and we will keep down in Parliament the pressure on, and we will certainly make this current government feel very, what you could say, basically that they're selling out to the lowest common denominator, and we'll make sure that they're aware of that.
There's no question that trying to save TV7 is the first step. But as we've heard from Professor Murdoch, we have to demand more. So first step is tell everyone you know about the importance of saving this asset. And then it's also going to be really important to build a campaign for better and true public broadcaster that's even more well-resourced. And I was thinking about our options for funding a truly independent public broadcaster. And I was thinking this is one of the unusual situations in which if there was that pressure on, there isn't much they can threaten us with if we were going to levy the pay TV providers or the commercial operators such as Sky TV, because what are they going to do? Leave? Oh, that wouldn't be such a shame, but I mean, they're not going to leave. So there is that opportunity, and I think that we need to build huge public support for that, and ultimately I think we need to change the government. I think that's the best option.
But there are a number of trust structures that one can think about to build around and protect a public broadcaster and protect democratically significant journalism. So there is a lot of new thinking about the ways in which the old model is busted. The old model of funding is busted. Actually, you know, Television New Zealand does very well on its advertising, but there's no guarantee that it will continue to do well. Sky is inexorably taking the ground out from under it. And if Television New Zealand thinks that it can continue to win the game in terms of entertainment, forget about it. Murdoch has much bigger pockets. He has much larger libraries, enclosed libraries of entertainment products. Nobody can beat him at entertainment. So TVNZ is going to have to rethink its role as well. And it may be that something like a trust structure for TVNZ7, where it has its own trust board, where it operates according to a trust deed and has a separate mandate that is clear, would be a better way of protecting public service broadcasting than the charter on TVNZ7. A trust which separates TVNZ or public service broadcasting from the commercial arm of TVNZ7. TVNZ. I just wanted to address also the question about political interference. If Murdoch cared to, and I'm not sure whether he has cared to, he could interfere, as he's done in Australia and Britain and America, in broadcasting. Don't worry, he does. And he does it privately. Nobody hears about it. But in the case of the BBC, he's also publicly attacking public service broadcasting. There is something very pernicious, and Graham Murdoch touched on it, and that is commercial speech. The fact is that a quarter of an hour of every channel in this country is commercial speech. And commercial speech is a form of political speech. It is a form of political speech that invites you to buy your way out of collective problems. Okay. If you're rich enough, you can get behind the walled fortress of privilege. You can buy your way out. You can buy goods. You can get to a better neighbourhood and so on. But eventually you're going to have to come out. And you're eventually going to have to face the fact that our streets are more crime-ridden, we're in a more inegalitarian society, etc., etc., etc. Unless we have a public service broadcaster, we're going to be surprised when we come out behind our walled fortress of privilege and find what the real world is really like, because it's nothing like what we see on New Zealand television at the moment.
I know that you all believe really strongly in this, in keeping public television alive. And it's yours. Just remember, it's yours. It belongs to you, and it must not go. And we must keep it. And even if Channel 7 goes, we must keep it alive, and you must not give up. So you know that there is a lot of things you can do, but I guess my plea to you tonight is don't give up, get mad and express it. Express it in all the ways that you can, and talk to people. Talk to more people about the importance of it. Not just about Channel 7, but the importance of public broadcasting. You know why it's important. You know it's important to our identity. It's important to us as a nation and who we are. And I want Miles to stand up. Come on. Because he is leading the Save TVNZ campaign, and he needs a big clap. Miles is the person that you can go to, and he's on Facebook, he's contactable, there's information at the door. You need to get more people involved in this campaign. You mustn't give up, and you must get mad, and you must believe that we can change this. We can keep public television in our country for us.
Before I finish, I would really like to just make a big say a big thank you to all the crew who have worked so tirelessly to make tonight happen. I think they've done a really great job. So a round of applause, please. And so we as a committee are doing something, but I'd really like to get feedback on what other people think we could do. Obviously, writing to the MPs, writing to your MP, I mean, as the man earlier said, he discovered that a national MP is behind TVNZ7, and that's fantastic. I'm going to get his name. And you know, and so there's lots of people like that. We need to find them, and we need to work on them to change. I mean, we might even get some movement in the next month. Who knows? Who knows? But it's certainly, you know, if we can just make that happen, then that's great. So contacting MPs and so forth is one thing. Talking about it with friends, emailing. What else can we do?
Writing letters to the paper.
Writing letters to the paper. Thank you, Joe. Exactly. Also, my funding person says, please, you can also donate to Save TVNZ7 as well. I'm sure lots of people already have, and we're doing really well. So thank you very much. But definitely, more donations mean we can run adverts in the papers, which we have started doing. We put one in the Herald, we're going to put one in the Don Post soon. We're going to start targeting them at involving the National Party in this conversation somehow. So the more donations we have, the more ads we place, the more strong we become, the more signatures we get. It's a snowball effect. So please help out in that way if you feel you can. Yeah, and I'll just leave it there. Thank you very much.
You know, when television started in Auckland in 1960, in New Zealand, there were no ads on television at all. By 1961, they'd arrived, and then they continued to increase and increase and increase to the point where now we have, as one or two people have pointed out here, absolute saturation advertising. The other interesting thing is how these channels place programs which they think will be of interest to people like you and me and the rest of us. Way back in 1969-70, I was on a program called Gallery, a current affairs program. Massive audience watched it. Mind you, there's only one channel, to be fair. But the interesting thing, it was on about 7:30 from memory, in what we now call peak time. Right? So that was something, and a part of this whole idea that there's an important function of democracy in all of this. I'm still on a program which is about politics in New Zealand and current affairs in New Zealand. You can see it at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning on TV3, or you can watch a little bit later and watch Paul Holmes at 9 a.m. On TVNZ. And as you can imagine, the audiences for that are absolutely minuscule.